Today we'll be hearing from Ms Bulger on behalf of the lost residents. But before we do, I wonder if there's any matters which parties wish to raise.
So just on the site visit, I'm sure we'll address that before we break, but you now have the email of the 28th of October which accompanied the site itinerary plan. Thank you.
Yes, we'll certainly discuss in particular timings for the site inspections before we leave today. Over to you, Mr Finlay.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for delaying the start till 10 o'clock this morning. You're Michel Bulger, you're a Chartered Landscape Architect and a Director of Michel Bulger Expert Landscape Consultancy.
That's correct.
And you've set out further details of your qualification experience in section 1 of your report.
Correct.
We have not only a report, 2 supplementary documents and a recognition from you. I'm not going to ask you to go to read out any of them in following the same practice that's been dealt with all the other witnesses. I'm going to ask you a number of supplementary questions. And it would help, I think, to have to hand with the first supplementary question your first supplementary document, or additional document, supporting document, and if you could turn to your annotated figure 6.5. Which is just 6.5 from the EIA, but you've helpfully included the viewpoints, which makes orientation and understanding that a little bit easier. The first issue I wanted to ask you about was your view on that you've covered in part in your evidence on the focus of the combination of landscape character types rather than individual landscape character types.
Yes, this landscape here is unusual and has been described as unique. And one of the reasons for this is that a landscape character type, the rolling hills, which in other parts of Cape Hess and Sutherland is a very expansive, large-scale landscape character type covering large areas, is here divided up by the straths in particular. So you end up with these, actually some of them quite small pieces, the ones that have been identified here as 135B and 135D. They're interspersed with the straths, and then of course we've got the coastal strip with the small crofts and farms that runs along the edge, and next to that the sea. And it's this combination which is not only unusual, and I think at the West Garty inquiry nobody could find another example that was agreed upon in Scotland, but it's this very combination of elements that gives it its distinctive quality, but also its valued and attractive qualities. It's the reason that it's one of the reasons that people come here to visit, that it's a tourist attraction. It's unusual to get the hills and the coastal crofts and the sea and the straths all in what's actually a relatively small area. Well, relative to Scotland, I mean, it is quite a large area. But, you know, even the bit that we're just looking at on the map here, we can see the complexity of the landscape. And it's that complexity and that composition that is really distinctive about this landscape.
And apart from your evidence and Ms. Kyman's, where has that been recognised?
Well, the designation of this SLA area, which crosses all these landscape character types, I think is a very clear recognition by the Highland Council that this area has a particular value, and that value is the combination of elements. Elsewhere, an SLA might be a single landscape character type, but here it's the combination of landscape types that's recognised by the SLA and is mentioned in the SLA, you know, it says in the citation, the character of this area is distinguished by its composition of contrasting landscape features, the contrasting landform, land cover and landscape pattern that emphasises the distinction of each other.
So just pause for a moment. So I'm going to expect the reporter to take that down at dictation speed. But that's CD 725 and it's internal page 50, I think electronic page 60. Starts, the map is map 9 is on electronic page 66, and the passage that you were quoting from is from the overview, which is on electronic page 67, I think.
That's correct. So it's the overview. So I've read the second sentence in the overview of the Lochfleet, Loughborough and Glenloth citation.
And then is that picked up in the key landscape and visual characteristics?
It is. It's picked up in bullet point 4 under key landscape and visual characteristics. The linear coastal shelf is defined on its interior side by the edge formed by the adjacent hill slopes. The elevation, which provides expansive views both along the coastal edge and outwards across the open sea. So that's picking up one of the contrasts. There is this additional contrast which is to do with the straths that go inland. But that key characteristic is picking up on that contrast between the hills and the coastal strip.
And I think, as you mentioned earlier, that have been the sensitivity of that particular combination to wind farm development was identified by the reporter at Westgarty. I think you've dealt with that in your second document, supporting landscape document. You've picked out various paragraphs from the Westgarty decision and given your view on them, and there was some discussion on that in Ms Horn's evidence in chief. But without needing to go to the Westgarty decision itself, which particular paragraphs did you have in mind, just for the reporter's note?
Well, the paragraphs I have in mind are 165, 3.165, sorry, to 3.167, and probably the easiest place to find them is actually in my supporting document 2.
I think, sorry, it's your supporting document 2, which is 1312 Roman numeral 3. I did.
Do you want me to read the paragraphs from the decision?
No, I don't think there's any need to do that.
But basically, the reporter, makes reference to the proximity of the different landscape character types, the fact that in this area, upland moorlands are not experienced in isolation without the presence of the low-lying coastal strip. Conversely, there is always a backdrop of elevated moorland to the coastal strip landscape character type. So this is something that, it's something that has been picked up by the local authority in its SLA designation, and it's been recognised by the reporter at the Westgarty inquiry.
And just moving on from that, you've commented on how whereas you've dealt with it in part in your evidence, and there's been some discussion about the constraints map, which is, I think, figure 3.1. But just so the reporter is clear, what's your view on what you would expect to see in the EIAR if that combination had been taken into account, or even if the SLA had been taken into account?
Well, whether the SLA would have appeared on that figure, which I would have expected it to, or on a separate figure, there is absolutely no indication in the EIA are that any landscape considerations were taken into account until after the site selection. Now, you know, it says they took into account national and local designations, but this is a local designation. It's not mentioned. It's not shown on a map. So there is no evidence that it was actually taken into account. And it seems to be that only on the appointment of Barton Wilmore, by which time the site had been selected and an initial layout had been put forward, does it seem to have come into a consideration, both the SLA and the previous decisions, such as West Garty. There's no evidence that prior to that it was recognised that there was this particularly distinctive landscape which had been identified under a local landscape designation.
You mentioned Barton Wilmore there, but I think it was, I have a feeling that may have been Pegasus Group that you were...
Sorry, yes. I don't know why I said Barton Wilmore. Sorry, apologies.
We won't
Pegasus.
retrospectively move Mr Denny's employment from Pegasus to Barton Wilmore, but we know exactly what you mean.
Yes, Pegasus, Pegasus, of course.
Grateful. Now, the LVIA does deal with the SLA in Appendix 6.4, which nobody's particularly commented on so far. I don't want you to go to the detail of it, but perhaps you'd like to summarise your view of the extent of assessment in LVIA Appendix 6.4.
Well, the assessment in LVIA 6.4, which is meant to be an assessment of the SLA, is actually just repeats the individual assessment for the individual landscape character types. Since the very point of the SLA is that it's about the combination of the types, this is completely missed.
Thank you. And then you've been placing emphasis on the importance of the early identification of the SLA or the absence of early identification of it. Why is that so important in terms of site selection?
Well, as has been kind of, mentioned already at this inquiry, it is inevitable that large-scale wind turbine development will have adverse landscape and visual impacts, and we all accept that. The main means of mitigating those impacts is by choosing the right location. And for that reason, both in Scotland and in England and in Wales, lots of studies have been done to identify which landscapes are more sensitive to wind turbine development and which landscapes are less sensitive. And the idea then is that you guide development towards the less sensitive landscapes and you avoid the more sensitive landscapes.
Just pause for a moment so the reporter can catch up with you. Watch his pencil, I think.
And I think it's really significant that even the LVIA identifies the site in which the site in which the turbines are located as having high sensitivity. Not only 135A, but 135B, 135D, and E. That should be a red flag. If you identify that the location has got high sensitivity to wind turbine development, it should be a red flag that this isn't the right site. But, as I've already said, Pegasus were not engaged in the project at the point when the site selection was made. And maybe had they been, they would have identified it as high sensitivity, said, look, there's been all these decisions that have been refused. This isn't the right location because you are not going to be able to mitigate the adverse impacts because it is the location that has inherent sensitivities.
And in terms of we heard some evidence on design iteration and improving and reducing the number of wind turbines. What's your comment on that? I think you may have heard Mr. Whelan comment on that yesterday.
Well, generally speaking, it's impossible to design out the wrong site. But I am sure that the reduction from 37 to 15 turbines has reduced the harm. It could hardly not. But what it can't do is take away the inherent harm that results from this location.
Thank you. One of the factors prayed and aid but both in the EIAR and indeed by Ms Horn and her evidence, is the adjacent presence of the adjacent wind farms, particularly at Gordon Bush, but also Kilbrowell. And they're clearly not far from the appeal site. What's your comment on that, having heard her evidence or listened to it in part?
Sorry. So I think it might actually just be quite helpful to go back to the figure 6.5 that we were looking at earlier. And although it's quite faint, you can just see the Kilbrowell, first of all, the Gordon Bush scheme, which sits just to the northwest of the site. And we can see that it sits in two different landscape character types. So it's on the edge of the rolling hills and the sweeping moorland. And similarly, if we go down, and it's the sort of area between north of viewpoint 11, we can see the Kilbrowell, which is also similarly located at the point at which the rolling hills transition into the sweeping moorland and flows. And there are actually four schemes there. Those four schemes have been particularly located in order to take advantage of the coastal hills. And the advantage that they're taking of the coastal hills is that they are enabling the coastal hills to screen them in views from the coast. So they do not appear on the ridgeline, on the apparent ridgeline. They do not appear when you are in the coastal locations such as Brora or Dornoch or the golf course and the beach and so on. So that's the first big difference, that they're located behind the hills. And there's been a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion from Francis Horn about the fact that the turbines are set further back from the edge than the turbines were at West Garty, for example. But if we just look at my figure, my figure 3. And we can see very clearly here that at this point, the coastal hills are wider than they are at other points. So as we go further down, the SLA, which is encompassing the higher ground, gets narrower. So yes, they are set further back from the coast, but they are still located on the higher ground, not behind it. Therefore, it's not the distance from the coast that matters, it's the elevation that matters. Are you on the higher ground or are you on the lower ground behind it, screened in views by the higher ground? And if we turn over to my figure 4, we can see a kind of a graphical comparison of the heights of the different schemes. And we can see that the Kintradwell, as well as being larger turbines, they actually start above the height of the highest turbine in Gordon Bush. And I...
Just to... I didn't realise you were pausing for obvious reasons. Just before you develop that point, just to look at those, if you turn back to your figure 3, I can see that the highest located turbine on Kintradwell is KT1, which is, if not the closest, one of the 3 closest to the Gordon Bush turbines.
Sorry, I missed that.
The highest located proposed wind turbine on Kintradwell, which is KT1.
Yes.
If you look on MB3, is either closest to or very nearly the closest to the highest located, the next turbine on Gordon Bush, which is GB1, I think.
Yes.
Which is also the highest turbine on Gordon Bush.
Which is the highest turbine on Gordon Bush, yes. Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just going to, looking at my diagram on figure 4, I was just going to make a couple of comparisons. So, for example, the height of Benbraggie is just, I can't remember now whether it's 395 or something, but it's just under 400 metres. So it's just below the height of the highest Gordon Bush extension. That's the height of Benbraggie. And then, as we've already discussed, the Manny is 33 metres on top of that. Ben Dorain, which is the highest point in the area where Kintradwell is located, which lies to the north, is 628 metres, and that is the height of the nacelle of Kintradwell Turbine 1. So the Kintradwell Turbine 1 and several other of the Kintradwell turbines are actually, their blade tips will be higher than the highest point on this range of hills. And so consequently, the hills can't function for them in the way that they function for Gordon Bush and Kilbrow. They can't screen them from the coast because they're higher than them and sitting on the top of them.
Thank you. I think that's that. I think we want to move on and next make a point, both detailed and otherwise, about two of the Westgarty visualisations. And they're to be found in CD 11.7. And if we go first to the Westgarty visualisation for Skelbo, and we can see that that's taken from the A9. Let's figure AEI 7.15.
Which viewpoint is that, Mr. Finlay?
It's viewpoint 15 for Westgarty. The equivalent viewpoint for Kintradwell is taken slightly further slightly closer to the turbines, right down on the loch shore. Now,
That's correct.
just, I think first of all you wanted to, if you turn on to the 75mm focal length.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty locating this particular
Sorry,
image. Beg pardon.
The should.
Got
Volume 2 figures.
Volume 2 figures, yes.
And it should be on. It should be viewpoint 15 in there.
Thank you.
Now, before we get to the details of this viewpoint, I think you wanted to make a point just to contrast the standard of visualizations or photomontages here and in the Kintradwell visualizations, just so it's a matter the reporter's aware of when he is going out on site and reviewing them at home.
Yes, I think it's very interesting having the Westgarty visualisations at the inquiry, because one of the things it points up is the difference in the way the visualisations have been, the clarity of the visualisations. That's both the clarity of the photography and the clarity of how the turbines are seen. Now, turbines will be seen in all sorts of different weather conditions. Sometimes they'll be less visible, sometimes they'll be more visible. The human eye is much cleverer than the camera, particularly when it comes to identifying things on horizons. It's also the fact that, of course, the turbines are moving and the photographs aren't. Therefore, it should be the case that when the visualisations are prepared, they should be prepared to show the most, for the developer, the worst case scenario, i.e. the clearest conditions. In a lot of the Kintradwell visualisations, the turbines aren't very clear on the horizon, and yet it's very evident from looking at wind turbine development in this area that it is very clear when you have the right conditions. And therefore, I'd like you to have in mind the clarity that's shown on the Westgarty visualisations when you are viewing the Kintradwell ones.
So that's the sort of general point, just a general caveat. You're not suggesting, just in case anyone's concerned, that the visualisations can't be relied upon to be used or anything like that.
Not at all. I'm sure you will be able to make that adjustment in your head.
Then the point about we can turn up the Kintradwell visualisation if needs be, but the reason for taking the portrait to viewpoint 15, what's the particular purpose of that?
Well, the Kintradwell location is, for the location for the viewpoint, is down on the edge. And if we're looking at the Westgarty one, it's near where it says Castle Remains of. And if you look at the ZTV, it's obvious that there is quite limited visibility from down there, and that is indeed what the visualisation shows. Conversely, and this section of the A9, the ZTV, which we can go to in a minute, just to confirm that, shows that there would be significantly more visibility. And if we turn the pages and look at the Westgarty visualisation, so for instance, the third one, we can
Is that the 75mm one?
Yes.
And you're picking out that rather big, large white house. Is that Dunrobin?
No, I'm not sure what that large white house is, but it isn't. I don't think it's not Dunrobin. What you can see is we can obviously see where the Westgarty turbines were proposed, but we can see the ridge along which we know very clearly the Kintradwell turbines would be visible. So we don't need to have the visualisation to know the visualisation would have been useful to know exactly what we would have seen, but we can see that it would be very clear. Whereas if we now turn to the Skelbo visualisation in the Kintradwell, which is viewpoint 13,
probably best to do this from CD 113, so you're comparing like visualisations with like.
yes.
So that's the Highland Council visualisations rather than the SNH visualisations. I think that document Mr. Trinick's going to be taking to you later in the event.
Sorry, which viewpoint is it?
13.
13.
We can see that not only is this a viewpoint from which that sort of distinctive ridge along the heel lines that we can immediately recognise isn't apparent in the same way, but there are virtually no turbines visible, and that is obvious from looking at the ZTV. I don't know if we want to briefly go and look at that, or
I think
we should.
It's a matter for the reporter, but I'm sure whether you'd like to have that demonstrated now. The ZTV, I think, is 6. Will be
is 620. It's figure 620. Or the most useful one is figure 620.
So that's CD 1.4, figure 620.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to be clear, the figure you've taken to us at 620 is hub heights, but I mean it still makes the same point.
Well, actually, that's interesting. I hadn't particularly picked that it was hub height, so in fact, it even.
So what's that showing for the?
So if you unfortunately, because it doesn't have the viewpoints on it, but if you can sort of like make your way from Aurora down past Golspie, you can see Skelbo and you can see the little bird there, and we can see that the viewpoint chosen is in a yellow area, which is where we know that there's going to be 1 to 3 proposed turbines visible, whereas up on the A9, which is where the Westgarty turbine, the visualisation was taken from, visualisation ranges between 11 up to 11. There's a section where it's up to 11 turbines visible. And as we can see, and that's hubs visible, so obviously there'd be more blades. There isn't anything that's interrupting the theoretical visibility there because it's simply determined by the landform.
And then I think wanted to make a similar point, again, by reference to the viewpoint 14 in Westgarty, which is Embo, which is just slightly further east of the Skelbo viewpoint.
That's right.
back to CD17.
And that is viewpoint 14. So we've seen the view from the road, and then if we go east and we go to the coast, this is Embo. Now, this is one of the viewpoints that the reporter mentions on several occasions in her decision. At the time, we criticised this visualisation because it's taken from behind the caravans. I don't know whether you've had a chance to visit Embo, but there is a beautiful beach. So, I mean, a really stunningly beautiful beach. I completely understand why these people come and stay in these caravans. The other side, and obviously if you're standing with your back to the caravans, you have pretty much the same view, but you don't have the caravans in it. So if we look at the 75 focal length on this one, and in fact, in this one, I think some of the hills are a bit clearer even. We can see beneath the Westgarty turbines that patch of woodland which is on your right as you go up Glenloth. So you can see how Glenloth goes in there, and then obviously the Kintradwell turbines would be ranged along the ridge line to the left of that. Yeah. So this was a viewpoint that particularly noted by the reporter in her decision, one that we don't have a visualisation from, and it's the combination of all these views from these really very special places like Embo Beach. Even though they're at some distance, we can see how clear the turbines will be on certain days. We know that the reporter was concerned previously about those views, even though the turbines were further away. She raised them as being a particular concern, which is why I feel that those more distant viewpoints are still significant, because the current uncluttered nature of that skyline, that prominent and distinctive skyline, is really important in the overall character of this coastline. And it's really important. It's one of the things that people value. It's one of the things that people come to see, appreciate.
I think 3 more questions to cover before we finish. You've been making the contrast with Westgarty. I think it's certainly suggested in Sworn's evidence that this Kintradwell is better sited and perhaps a better scheme than Westgarty. What would you say about that? Whether this Kintradwell is it as bad as Westgarty, if I can use that non-technical language?
No, Westgarty was worse, and in particular it was worse because it affected 2 communities. It affected both Brora and Helmsdale, and it affected Glenloth. But those are the differences between the schemes. It's the similarities that are more significant, and the similarities are that they were both located within the coastal hills. They were both located on the tops of those hills, interrupting that currently uncluttered skyline. They are both visible from coastal areas such as Brora Beach and Golf Course, Dornoch, Embo, etc. They both had negative impacts on settlements, although in the case of Kintradwell, Brora only, and Westgarty was Brora and Helmsdale. And they both have visual impacts on the A9, not as long a section of the A9 as for Kintradwell as it was for Westgarty. They are also similar in that they both go against the existing pattern of wind turbines, which is behind the hills, screened by the hills, hidden by the hills, not on top of them.
Thank you. An ultimate question is that I don't think we need to turn to it, but first to SNH's letter in this case, which is CD 311, and we've been through that in some detail, and I think the paragraph that Mr. Trenick has put certainly to one, if not both, of the council witnesses, paragraph 315 from memory, which says that S&H, as they then were, didn't consider it merited an objection. From reading the rest of that letter, do you understand why they reached that conclusion?
No. It's the majority of the letter sets out all the things that we, myself and the Highland Council witnesses have been setting out, like, for instance, the fact that to say that only 3 of the viewpoints were significant, they considered was serious underestimation. That's in their letter. The impacts from the different high points, the lack of connection, the fact that they don't fit with the pattern of the existing turbines, all the things we've said. I find it odd. I find they don't explain why they, having said all those things, having identified all these issues, having identified harm at considerable distances, you know, like down as far as Dornoch and so on, they then conclude that it doesn't cross some bar to do with regional effects. They don't actually explain what that bar is and why, given all the things that they have said in the rest of the letter, that they come to that conclusion. So I don't understand why they come to that conclusion, because they don't give us their reasoning.
I think I said 315, I should have said 35. Just for your notes there. And the last point is that we remember on the first afternoon, Ms. Horn made a point about Glen Sletdale.
Yes.
And just noticed that in the extract from the Ordnance Survey map that you have on the front cover of your documents, Glen Sletdale features on the half side of the page. Glen Sletdale features almost centre stage. First of all, have you visited Glen Sletdale?
I have visited Glen Sletdale. I have walked through Glen Sletdale and up to the location of a number of the turbines, including Turbine 1. We were intending to visit all of the locations of the turbines, but there was some shooting going on at the time, so we had to miss out on. I think it was 8, 7, and 8. So we didn't go up. We didn't go up for 8 in particular.
I think the point was being made in the first day that Glen Sletdale is not as accessible, certainly by road, obviously, than Glen Loth. But in terms of being accessible and visible, and in terms of its impact of Kintradwell, what would you like to comment in response to Ms. Horn's observations?
Well, I accessed it. I'm not a mountaineer. It's not very far from the coast. There is limited parking, but there are places you can park on the road from Glenloth. It clearly isn't as accessible as Glenloth, because Glenloth has got a road down it, and therefore it's going to be used by people in vehicles and people on bikes and so on. However, Glen Sletdale is very accessible for an ordinary fit person. It is very secluded. The river, as we can see, has got these kind of like numerous little, it's not undulations when it's, sort of weaving around. Sorry, I can't think of a proper technical landscape term for it. Meandering, meandering, thank you. It's very beautiful. It's very unspoilt. Interestingly, when you're in Glen Sletdale, you don't see the Gordon Bush turbines, which is until you start getting higher up, which is another another really effective thing of putting them behind the higher hills. It's not just that you don't see them from the coast, but you don't see them until you get to the higher points on Glen Sletdale. Also, it is quite obviously steep in places, and I think it's probably my experience of actually walking up some of the locations of those turbine that made me concerned about that point about them on the steep slopes. Now, obviously, the only people who will be viewing them will be people in Glen Sletdale and not from the viewpoint locations that Ms Horn went through. But also, what's obvious is that there's going to have to be quite a lot of cutting in to the landscape in order to achieve level bases, which adds to the sort of harm to the fabric of the landscape. And as I'm sure you have driven along the road in Glenloth, and you can see, the repairs that they're having to do to the hydroelectric and how scarring it is when you start, digging up all the kind of like the ground cover and so on. That will be, a lot of that will all be visible. The tracks, the pads, the borrow pit, for people walking through and using Glen Sletdale.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Mr. Trenick will have some questions for you.
Mr. Trenick.
So may I just have a brief comfort break before we start? Thank you.
Yes, fine.
Good morning, Ms. Bond. I understand you're the sole witness for Loths Residents Association, but you've seen the pattern that I've followed of asking each witness on the other side certain questions, and the focus with you is very much on the differences between Kintradwell and West Garty.
Okay. Yeah.
There will be other questions, and Dean, I'm going to start with one or two of the points that you made in chief just now, while they're fresh in my mind. You said that landscape sensitivity guides help guide developers to less sensitive areas, but you noted that even the LVIAs had identified this area as one of high sensitivity. The whole of LCT 135 should be a red flag. And then you talked about Pegasus engagement.
Yes.
After the site selection. Whether or not things went in the right order at that stage, I'm actually not terribly interested in. What is of interest to me, and I think should be of interest to you, is that Francis Horn is here to give evidence and is able to support the project and give a professional views in saying that this development can be satisfactorily accommodated in this area. I'm sure you agree that it's your professional differences that the reporter needs to evaluate.
It certainly is our professional differences that he needs to evaluate, but I do also think it is relevant that the very issues that we're talking about in terms of the landscape and the SLA and the distinctiveness of this landscape didn't seem to be taken account of when the site was selected. I think that's a factor he should also take into account.
Very well. The second point from your evidence in chief comes from what you said about the heights of turbines in relation to other heights. And looking at your figure 4, and we're familiar with it, we needn't go back into it, that's just a point of reference. But I'm sure you would agree with me that the perceived height of a structure in the landscape, in this case wind turbines, it might be something else, relative to the viewer and relative to the height of hill, it's a little more complex than simply pointing to heights AOD as a general. I make that as a general proposition.
Well, generally speaking, I would say yes, that's absolutely true. But in this particular instance, the heights AOD are absolutely fundamental because, as I keep saying, You know, the reason we can't see Kintradwell and Gordon Bush from the coast is because they're on lower land. The reason we will be able to see Kintradwell is because they're on higher land. Therefore, in this particular instance, it's fundamental.
Well, of course, you're right. That if it's on higher land and it's closer to the coast, you're going to see it. You won't see Gordon Bush. But the quality of perception of a particular development, its height in relation to the hill, where it sits in relation to the coast, where it sits in relation to a viewer at a valued viewpoint, is a little more nuanced than simply saying it's on a high hill, therefore you will see it.
Well, I'm not sure it is in this case more nuanced than that. The point is you are going to see these turbines because they are on the high hills. You don't see the Gordon Bush and the Kintradwell because they are on lower land behind the higher hills. I just think that is a fundamental issue to do with this scheme. And therefore, I think the nuances, that's a little bit like saying, well, could you improve it? You know, the scheme is in two groups. Could you improve it by making it look as if it's one group? Well, those are all nuances. They aren't going to change the fact. The fact here is they're visible because they're on the higher ground.
Okay. You were taken in chief to the position of Nature Scott, and you said from the rest of their letter, you didn't understand their conclusion. It was odd as they didn't explain why they didn't object. And let's just look at CD 311 at paragraph 3.5. And there they say, in bold, these impacts, the impacts of Kintradwell, are relatively localised and are not considered to significantly affect the wider regional distinctive character. I gather from your evidence-in-chief that that doesn't sufficiently explain to you why Nature Scott did not object.
It doesn't, because it doesn't actually tie in very well with the rest of the letter. So, you know, relatively localised, but they are talking about concerns with views as far as Dornoch. So I'm not quite sure what their relatively localised means. And they have everything else that they say is concerned with the harm that the scheme causes. And therefore, I don't understand their bar, as it were, that they are then saying it doesn't cross. It doesn't seem to me they have explained that. They've explained the reasons they don't like the scheme. They used the term about this landscape being inherently sensitive. So I don't feel they have explained in their letter why they've come to that conclusion. That is a statement that they make, without doubt. They make that statement. I can't see the reasoning behind that statement in their letter.
How many projects, wind farm projects, have you been involved in Scotland in the last 10 years?
Only this one and West Garty.
Nature Scott's involvement is rather more extensive than that, isn't it? Don't you think that part of the problem that you may have is that Nature Scott have got their eye in rather better than yours when it comes to making this sort of judgment?
No, that's not the criticism I'm making. The criticism I'm making is that I do not read in their letter how they reach that conclusion. Now, I might disagree with their reasoning. I don't know. What I'm saying is the reasoning isn't there. All the reasoning in the letter is about the harm of the scheme. There's no explanation as to why they come to that conclusion.
Have you read, I don't want to have to go there, but the guidance that Nature Scott issued to their relevant employees on how to identify matters of national interest when considering developments?
I have read it, and we looked at it yesterday in the inquiry. And
I'm sure you have no doubt that those, or the person, whatever it was, within Nature Scott who considered this development had clear regard to that guidance?
Well, what I don't know, because it's not in the letter. If what I would have expected to see is an explanation based on that document as to why they reached that conclusion. That's what I don't see in the letter. Now, I'm not making political accusations about the person who read it and said, no, they didn't take that guidance into account. What I'm saying is, I don't see it in the letter.
And that those people or that person who came to the view they came to, had they decided to object, of course, you know that would have had to go to a national interest panel.
I do know that, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. I understand your position. Now, going on to questions which I prepared before the evidence-in-chief this morning, I'm not, in case Mr Finlay thinks otherwise, I'm going to go into policy, but I do want to take you briefly to section 9 of your inquiry report. It's on page 43, internal page 43. Paragraph 911, you say the inappropriateness of the location was highlighted by the reporter for the 1997 inquiry, who identified that the landscape surrounding the site is nationally distinctive. Well, of course, the site you're talking about there is the three sites of West Garty, as it was called then, Garty Moor, and the third one, Craigegg, I think it was. Looking at Diana Royce for help there. Thanks. That's right, isn't it?
Those were the sites, but the landscape that he identified as being nationally distinctive was much wider than the sites, because he was talking about the coast and the combination and so on. So that wider landscape remains the same landscape, although clearly the sites are different.
Okay. I went through CD 13.1 with great pain. Before the inquiry, trying to find out where, I'm sure it's there, I'm not doubting you for a minute, where you found the identification by the reporter of this landscape being nationally distinctive. I'm sure you've got it to hand and you can tell me.
All I have to hand, and I'm not going to go through the whole decision at this point unless you want me to,
right,
is what I have in my 1.4.2.
Yes.
Which is not the phrase that I'm picking up. Now, I believe it's there, but I don't think it's sufficiently important for us to go through the whole decision. So I'm quite happy to take that particular one out rather than to have to go through it, if that's what you'd like.
Well, no, that'd be a cheap victory for me. I don't want you just to give way on something. In 1.4.1 and 2, you 1 and 2, you recall what Philip Hutchison said. And there's nothing there which tells me that he said that the landscape surrounding the site was nationally distinctive. So I thought, that's interesting. Let's go and look at 13.1. So you've made me read through it all, and thanks very much for that. But I couldn't find it, so I'm asking you if you know where it is. If you don't, you don't, that's fine.
I don't.
All right. And when that reporter was talking about the inappropriateness of the location, well, clearly he wasn't judging Kintradwell. He was judging the developments in front of him. That's right.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. And you say that its distinctiveness, and you've just used the phrase national distinctiveness, or nationally distinctive, its distinctiveness is subsequently confirmed by its designation as a special landscape area. Well, that's not a national designation, it's a local designation, isn't it?
It is a local designation.
Yeah.
But I think at the time of the 1997 inquiry, there wasn't a special landscape area here. So the reporter was having to come to his own conclusions without the assistance of the Highlands Council having actually designated it as a special landscape area, which happened subsequent to the inquiry.
If you go to paragraph 922, I think Mr Finlay explained the position, but I just want to put it to you. You say that with regard to policy 57, the development would have an adverse effect. Are you saying that that is the development test within policy 57?
No, I'm not doing development test. I'm setting out I'm setting out the facts on the face of the policy. I'm not doing the test in them.
So you're setting out what on the face of
the policy?
You think that's on the face of the policy?
Well, the policy asks for. Let me go back to the beginning where I set it out. So, paragraph 2.2.5 in my report sets out parts of policy 57, and it says one of the criteria which I've listed is, for features of local regional importance, we will allow developments if it can be satisfactorily demonstrated that they will not have an unacceptable impact on the natural environment, amenity and heritage resource. Yep. Features of local importance include special landscape areas. Now, in my evidence, I consider that the development does have a significant adverse impact. What I know is that I am not doing the unacceptable test, because that's the planning balance, and that's not part of my evidence. So what I'm saying is it has a significant adverse impact on the SLA, and it's then obviously for the reporter to decide if that is unacceptable in the light of the whole planning balance.
That's okay. I anticipated you weren't trying to give policy evidence, and indeed in 924, where you record what you say about policy 67, we needn't go to it, but I can take it that you're not trying there to set out the precise development test within that policy.
I'm not doing the planning balance.
That's fine. That's okay. Taking another point from that, from not that section, from 144, before we get on to West Garty and stuff. The LVIA does not address the concern raised by the reporter in 97, nor the report in 2017 doesn't explain why a scheme set out would be acceptable in this landscape. So you say you don't deal in acceptability. And you go on to say when a scheme of 17 turbines and an earlier scheme were considered to have unacceptable effects. Can you confirm again? You don't deal in acceptability. I can confirm that I don't deal in acceptability, and that's not a good use of the word there, acceptable. What I'm pointing to, which is something that I do feel very strongly, is that the LVIA should have addressed the conclusions of the, if not the 1997 reporter, should have addressed the conclusions of the West Garty reporter with regard to landscape harm, and should have assessed whether whether they considered that the Kintradwell scheme avoided the significant harms that the reporter had identified, and that is not done in the LVIA. So that would have been a better way to put it. I'm sure you're right, but I'd rather want to focus on the evidence of the day than the archaeology of the LVIA. So if we can now move on to 142 in your inquiry report. Sorry, 321 was the previous question. Sleep, apologies. This was the 97 report, and what Mr Hutchinson said was that the coastal strip and seaward-facing slopes between Ballinreach and Portgower is no less distinct and offers that, indeed, the combination of landscapes to which you referred in evidence in chief. But if we go to your SLD1, the A3 document, very useful document, I may say, that you provided, and go to figure 1 within that. Wait a minute, something else. We can see, for the reporter's note, that where Ballon reaches, it's along the southern boundary of the Kintradwell site, and we all know where Portgower is going up towards Helmsdale itself. So that's the piece of coast to which Mr. Hutchinson is referring in the passage that you quoted. Yep. That's correct?
Yeah, I'm just reading it again.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we go now to CD 1039, the report of the inquiry, the West Garty inquiry in 2017, and go to paragraph 3.176. We see the evidence of the inquiry from the Highland Council was that the combination of moorland hills and slopes and coastal shelf.
Sorry, I haven't.
Sorry,
sorry, I just haven't
My
got
apologies.
yes.
Evidence that the inquiry from Highland Council was the combination of moorland hills and slopes and coastal shelf landscape character types. That's what they were called at that time. In the vicinity of the application site is unique in a Highland context. You use the word unique in evidence in chief. But of course, what the reporter was talking about there was the vicinity of the application site, that being the West Garty site, correct? You don't know otherwise.
I mean, you know, it doesn't define there what vicinity means. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the whole of that seaboard from Brora upwards and before, as you approach Brora, is all part of this distinctive landscape.
Yes, but that reporter didn't know about Kintradwell. She was assessing the West Garty proposal. It's a reasonable interpretation, is it not, that when she was talking about the vicinity of the application site, she meant just that, the vicinity of the application site?
No, I don't think it's reasonable, because we were concerned with impacts on Brora, we were concerned with impacts on this stretch, we were concerned with impacts around Helmsdale. So I would say it's reasonable that when she was talking about the vicinity of the site, she meant all of that, because those were all the areas that were impacted by the West Garty development.
Yes, but of course, if we go to your figure 14, which is a ZTV for Kintradwell.
My figure 14.
Page 14 of SLD1.
Oh, page 14,
my apologies. Yeah. It's figure 627.
Yeah.
Which is a ZTV for Kintradwell. And we look at what I believe, you think otherwise, that's fine, is the vicinity of the West Garty application site. If we look between the southern edge of the Kintradwell site all the way up to Portgower, there will be no theoretical visibility at all of Kintradwell. That is correct, isn't it? And Cowling agreed that.
Well, there is some. She may have agreed that there wasn't on the A9, but there is some on the land that between the A9 and the coast where the number 144 is. But that's a different question to the one that you were just asking me. I don't know whether it's because we've moved on. I thought this was all part of the same question, as to whether the previous inspector was considering the whole of this strip from Brora to Helmsdale, or just the bit from sort of Kintradwell to Helmsdale. And it's my view that she was considering the whole of that length, not just the bit to the north.
Well, we disagreed on that, but what I am drawing together, I'm drawing together the threads of what was said in 1997, the coastal strip and seaward-facing slopes between Ballan Reach and Portgower. And one of the schemes that reporter was looking at was what was then still called West Garty, and you provided the map showing the locations of the new West Garty site, the old West Garty site, and you said Helmsdale. I think it was called Garty Moor then, that site, and Craig Riskin. And so we know where West Garty was in 97, and we know where it was in 2017. And my proposition is that it is this strip between Portgower and the southern edge of Kintradwell that both the 1997 and the 2017 reporters had in mind when describing what was relevant to West Garty.
Well, I disagree. I disagree because certainly with regard to West Garty, obviously I wasn't at the earlier inquiry and you were, but certainly with regard to West Garty, I think that it was the whole of that strip which was of concern, not just the bit north of Kintradwell.
All right. Have your view. Thanks very much.
Sorry, can I just ask Mr. Chin to remind me of the paragraph that set off that line of cross-examination?
It was 321 in the inquiry report and paragraph 3176 within CD 1039.
Very good.
Okay. Now, comparing West Garty and Kintradwell, we can start by looking at paragraph 143 of your inquiry report. And we see the now Deputy Chief Reporter's conclusions on visual effects in the second half of that paragraph, experienced by a large number of tourists and others travelling along the A9 trunk road, local residents going about their daily lives in Helmsdale and Brora, tourists visiting these villages, and locals and tourists experiencing the tranquility and wilderness landscape of Glenloth. Now, we've already established the fact of no visibility on the A9 along the stretch of road we just discussed. And that applies, I think, not only to Portgower, but all the way to Helmsdale, isn't it? There's no visibility there.
There's no visibility at Helmsdale.
And there's no visibility within Helmsdale.
No.
And there's very limited visibility within Glenloth.
Yes.
I don't think you claim significant impacts on Glenloth.
I don't.
So at the least, and as far as I'll take it with you, at the least what we have for Kintradwell is simply one settlement on which we have impacts on one settlement, Brora. We do not have impacts on Helmsdale. We do not have significant impacts on what is truly, I've been up there a lot of times, a wonderful glen, almost a West Highland glen, and East Scotland context, Glenloth. And we have much reduced impacts on the A9 until you get to Brora. That's a factual comparison.
Well,
isn't
and I did say in my evidence in chief that it was one settlement, not two, and that Glenloth wasn't affected. So yes, I agree with that. However, that doesn't mean that the impacts on Brora in particular, on the beach, on the golf course, are not significant. It also, when we're looking at those further viewpoints from south along the coast, which the reporter was also very concerned about, those remain significant. The fact that it's not visible on the stretch up to Helmsdale doesn't affect how visible it is from those more southerly viewpoints.
Thank you. Excuse me, sir, I've got my own archaeological exercise now. It's called finding a document. SL. Yeah. Thank you very much. I want to go to SLD2. This is CD 1312. No, the other one. April. CD 1312.3. I have alongside you also CD 39, 1039. Where the hell's it gone? It's okay, I found it. Go to page 15, would you, of SLD2. And I'll be looking at what you say about paragraph 3.174. What you quote from 3.174 is bullet point 12 under the heading accessible yet secluded lens and locks, viewpoints 8, 9 and 10, and some words. And you say in the right column, Kintradwell would have a major adverse effect on Glen Sletdale. I suggest to you that 3.174 goes rather wider than that. You finish your quotation as feeling of emptiness. And that comes at the end. But what the reporter is really dealing with there, I suggest, when you read that as a whole, is Glenloth and Strathala. That's the focus of the reporter's attention in that paragraph. It's actually nothing to do with Glen Sletdale.
No, she isn't, exactly. She isn't dealing with Glen Sletdale. She's dealing with Glenloth, and she's picking out some of... So first of all, she's relating it back to the SLA citation. The SLA citation which mentions accessible yet secluded glens and lochs. And she then goes on to quote another passage from the citation about about what you gain from these glens and lochs. Readily accessible, these sheltered glens offer a sense of seclusion, tranquility and intimacy from the busier coastal fringe. She then goes on to say, and I think this is relevant to Glenloth, and I think that it would have a significant impact on Glenloth. Now, well, interesting at the last inquiry, the point was trying to say that Glenloth wasn't secluded and intimate because it had vehicles going up and down it. But there we go. Now, instead of that, we have Glen Sletdale isn't secluded and intimate because it hasn't got a road going through it. They offer different things. I think Glenloth is secluded and intimate and wonderful and lovely, and the fact that it's got a road going through it makes it more accessible to a wider range of people. That doesn't mean to say that Glen Sletdale isn't important, because Glen Sletdale is actually much more secluded and intimate and tranquil because it doesn't have a road and it isn't that difficult to access. And therefore I do think that it's relevant. She was talking about Glenloth. I'm relating the point to Glen Sletdale.
Fine. I'll let you, I didn't interrupt, but you weren't answering my point. If you go to what you say on page 15 of your supporting document, you give a very partial quotation from the 3.174 and conclude on Glen Sletdale. It makes it appear as if that reporter was talking about Glen Sletdale. My point to you is that, and was simply, and no more than this, that when you actually look at what the reporter said in that paragraph, she's not focused at all on Glen Sletdale. Why should she be? That wasn't relevant to her. She's focused on Glenloth and Strathala. We know there is no ZTV in Strathala, and we've agreed a position on Glenloth. Am I correct?
You are correct, and I apologise if that is misleading. It wasn't intended to be.
All right.
I think I've made what I actually think very clear now. So,
go to page 18, would you, of SLD 2. You say under or for in relation to paragraphs 3.187 to 191 that not relevant or not engaged with the Kintradwell development. But let's just look at those paragraphs, shall we, in CD 1039. I'm sure you've read them thoroughly, so I'm not going to read every word, but so I'll let you just have a moment just to read those paragraphs quickly. And you're quite right that those paragraphs aren't engaged at Kintradwell, but that itself is relevant, isn't it? That the effects which he focuses on quite in some detail in these paragraphs in relation to Helmsdale are not relevant here because we have no effects on Helmsdale, and the reporter might wish to note that.
well, I've already agreed it. I said it in my evidence in chief. I've just agreed it with you now, so I don't think we're trying to hide it.
All right. I want to take another point from your evidence in chief at this stage. It relates to Westgarty viewpoint 15. So let's go to that, if you don't mind. Skelbo, I got the right one. Good.
Yeah.
That's, just remind me, would you, which viewpoint is that for?
13.
13, thank you. And your issue was the choice of location for the Kintradwell EIAR as compared with being higher up on the main road, the A9. That's what you were discussing.
That was what we were discussing, yeah.
Firstly, a very obvious and perhaps trite point that this viewpoint for Kintradwell was agreed as appropriate with Highland Council, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But obviously not with me.
It's entirely up to you to disagree with it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying you shouldn't.
No,
It was agreed. The second point is, of course, that the Kintradwell viewpoint is within the SLA, whereas actually if you're on the A9, you're outside the SLA, the boundaries between the two.
Yes, so that's a point, but of course the other viewpoint is on the A9, which is also one of the receptors of concern, so it's not like it's from an unimportant location. Okay,
but the other point to bear in mind, isn't it, we need to see why that viewpoint was selected, why it was agreed. And you didn't take us there, so let's go there to CD17.
Sorry, I've missed the number.
Sorry, CD17.
CD17. That may be one that I will need to download.
Yes, it wasn't what I notified to you. I'm terribly sorry.
It's okay.
Well, to be fair, it came out of evidence in chief, so that was the reason.
Just bear with me for. Okay, so do you know which part it is?
It's Appendix 6.3.
Appendix 6.3.
One day we will get environmental consultants to label pages properly so we can find them.
Appendix 6.3. 1.7. So technical appendices to the...
page 17, I'm told, of Appendix 6.3.
Doesn't seem to be labelled like that on mine. Don't know whether who's got a hard copy they could lend me.
Yeah, okay, let's find it. We're going to give you a hard copy.
Thank you.
Yeah. 6-3. Yeah, no. They're all numbered 1-7 in each thing.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So what I'm looking at here is viewpoint 13, obviously, and paragraph 114, therefore.
Yeah.
And 114.2, nature and sensitivity, a baseline view. 114.3, this viewpoint is representative of views possible from this viewing point close to Skelbo Castle. So the view provides car parking with interpretation board and benches to enjoy and appreciate the view. It's over Loch Fleet, which is a tidal lock connected with the Murray Firth, which is primary to the view. So you might have chosen somewhere else, but it wasn't happenstance. This viewpoint was selected for a good reason and agree with Highland Council.
Yes, I can see that. I can see that. But it is also the case that we could see from the Westgarty visualisations that from the A9 above Skelbo there will be clear views.
Well, to be fair, we don't have any visualisations. Had the point been raised, we could have provided them, but there aren't any. All we have is the ZTV colouring. It doesn't actually tell us more than that.
No, we have the photograph from the Westgarty, and we don't have photographs, visualisations from every single location from which the development will be visible. But we can tell whether it will be visible or not by using the ZTV and what we can see in terms of the horizon. So we can judge that the development will be visible from that section of the A9 above Skelbo.
I'm surprised to hear you say that as a landscape professional. You know very well that although a ZTV may show that a certain number of turbines may be visible at a certain point, all it may mean is that the tips of those turbines are visible. You don't know how much of the turbines, you don't know precisely what you will see, do you?
Well, you don't if you don't have a... So first of all, we were looking at the hub height, and we could see that there were up to 11 turbines at hub height would be visible. What we don't know is whether there might be intervening vegetation that would prevent us from seeing it. But because we have the view from Westgarty, and because, of course, the inspector will be able to drive it himself, he will be able to tell, with using the ZTV and his own eyes and the Westgarty visualisation, that there will be views of the Kintradwell scheme from that section of the A9.
All right. Well, we can agree to disagree there. Or I say disagree because I don't know what we would see and you think you know what you would see, and that's our disagreement. That's fine.
I'm happy for the reporter to make his own judgment on that one.
Okay. Go back to SLD2, please, which is at page 18, which deals with paragraph 3193. Here, this is a quotation of the whole of that paragraph, and you say that viewpoint 19 Garty Moor, 13 turbines will be visible at 2.9 kilometres distance at this viewpoint, and at viewpoint 6, 7, as for 1, 5 and 23, which I discuss above, local residents would see most of the turbines at relatively close quarters as they go about their daily lives. And you draw the conclusion of the right column, or your observation is, views of turbines will be pervasive for residents of Brora as they go about their daily lives. Let's go to CD 11.7, if we may. This is probably the longest exercise we'll be engaged in this cross-examination, and the viewpoints in CD 11.7.
Is that the viewpoints?
Which ones have we got there? Is that Kintradwell or is that
Westgarty?
Westgarty?
Yeah, no, I've got
it's
the
over
Westgarty
there.
here in front of me. It's the
You got
viewpoints
them?
we want.
All right,
yeah.
that's
yeah.
fine. Let's just take them in order, and I'm going through the ones that the reporter mentioned in the paragraph just quoted. That if you go to viewpoint 1, which is the well-known Brora lay-by, That's right. If you go to viewpoint 1 then, and we look at the view cone, see exactly where the viewpoint is from, and we go to the wire line and see the Westgarty turbines. But then if we go on to the 75mm photo montage, what we can, please, I'm not drawing comparisons with Kintradwell at the moment. I'll come to that later. I'm just looking at Westgarty. What we can see, I suggest, is that those turbines are on the coastal slope of the coastal hill. They are starting to come down towards the sea. Indeed, one of the turbines on the right, so it went towards the right, they're perched on the top on that coastal hill. That's right, isn't it?
They are on the coastal hill, yes.
Yeah. There's no other hill between there and the sea. They are on that coastal hill.
Well, there are lower hills between them and the sea. We can see the sort of like the top of a lower hill in front of them, but there aren't any higher hills.
No.
Well, they're not all. They're not all sitting in front of the ridge, so they are actually sitting slightly behind the highest point.
Well, we can see
Some of them are. They're a mix.
Yeah. Well, let's make that comparison now and go to CD 116.
In fact, it's possibly clearer to see on the. Sorry, it's possibly clearer to see if you look at the wire line. You can see that the ones on the right, what are they? 8 and 12 seem to be in front, and the rest of them seem to be sort of behind the.
The fact is, they're on the coastal hill.
They are sitting on the coastal hills.
On the coastal hill. Let's go to, by way of comparison here, because we have a comparison, to CD 116, and go to viewpoint 2 from the A9. And let's do what Mr. Finlay did and go to the 27-degree wire line, because that's a 75mm. And while I know you don't like it, and I'm not asking you to be a Kintradwell convert,
I am just struggling to find.
Oh, right, okay.
I am just struggling to find. So this is.
It's the wire lines within CD1. Again, it's not paginated, and blame will attach for that.
Is it viewpoint I?
No, viewpoint 2, small Roman 2.
And does that come after the I's?
Yes.
So 3, 4, 5.
Not too far.
So I've got viewpoint little I.
And then probably there are 3
viewpoint 2, and then I've got viewpoint.
Have you got 2 in there?
I don't seem to have 2 in this set. I can't. I don't know whether I'm being particularly thick, but I don't seem to be able to find it.
Maybe missing, I don't know.
Oh, so when you say 2, you mean 2 little I's? That's
Yeah.
sort of 2. Sorry, it wasn't. It was there.
Don't worry at all.
I was looking for something else. Roman
That's okay.
numeral 2. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the 27-degree wire line. Got that?
Yep.
No, I'm not asking you to like Kintradwell. We would ask you to accept that from this viewpoint in comparison with Westgarty, the turbines are much more set back behind the hill. You see less of the towers and the hubs.
So yes, I agree with you. You see less of the towers and the hubs than you do of Westgarty. But what's fundamental here is the fact that at the moment, in both situations, you had a skyline that had no turbines on it. You know, as Ms. Horn described yesterday or the day before yesterday, Virgin Territory. You know, it has no turbines on it. It doesn't even have telegraph masts and other things on it. The difference between the amount of turbine you would see is much less significant than the fact that you have no turbines at the moment and you would have turbines. That's what is similar about them, rather than the degree of turbine that you would see.
Ms Bolger, that's what you say. I'm not engaged in looking at the individual merits here at Kintradwell. I didn't play it again Sam evidence in relation to Westgarty. I'm looking at your play it again Sam evidence. That's why I'm making the comparison. This is comparative evidence. That's why I'm going here. Let's go on to viewpoint 5, please. And here we are looking from Helmsdale. Not surprisingly, there's no viewpoint for Kintradwell. It doesn't need to be. And I ask you, first of all, look at the view cone of viewpoint 5.
Sorry, we viewpoint 5 at Westgarty.
Viewpoint 5 for Westgarty, which is on the A9 at Helmsdale.
Yep.
And we see where it's from East Helmsdale, in fact. As you come down into the village, past the houses on the right, and down it goes. You can see the wire line. But I suggest that if you look at the 75mm photomontage, here we see transparently, clearly, the difficulty with Westgarty, that it's not in any way set behind the immediate range of hills. Those turbines are starting to walk down towards the sea, aren't they?
Well, whilst I agree that those turbines are very poorly sited, it comes back to my point that I think the fundamental thing is that there are no turbines, no clutter on the hills at the moment, and when you introduce the turbines, you even if you sited them better so that they didn't appear to be rolling down towards the sea, if they were actually behind those hills, if you still saw them in the way that, you know, above the skyline, they would still have a significant adverse impact.
I know the evidence you want to give about Kintradwell. I'm looking at the comparative exercise now. Perhaps we can take it in relation to every viewpoint that your fundamental position is you don't want to see turbines above the skyline. Well, let's just look at the comparative exercise, if we may. To
be fair, I think I was answering your point. You were saying these are particularly bad because they're falling down towards the coast. And I'm saying, no, whilst that is a bad aspect of them, it is not the fundamental aspect of them that is problematic.
All right, well, I'll listen to you every time and I won't interrupt, but I'll carry on with my exercise. Viewpoint 6, we can see is from Helmsdale Harbour. And if we look at the wire line, see the turbines. Now, what's interesting about the 75mm photomontage is, again, Westgarty, it comes over and down those coastal hills into LCT 144, doesn't it? It's walking into the next door landscape character type, coming very close to it.
That is one of the things that is bad about that scheme from this location,
yep.
Yes.
Okay. If we go to viewpoint 23 now, going through the ones that the reporter dealt with first. And that's a view, this is a Westgarty viewpoint 23 from Milton Farm. Go to the, I think we only have we do have a 75mm viewpoint there. I take you there, in order to be fair to your case, that in fact Westgarty there is hidden behind the immediate ridge rather more. So she made the observation, but perhaps it's not as pertinent to the point as for some other viewpoints at Milton. It's almost an observation, you don't need to reply. but to be fair to you, I took you there. Go to viewpoint 19, though, which is the last one, and which is from Garty Moor. And we can see the wire line for that distance of 2.9 kilometres. This is one specifically mentioned by her with a distance in that paragraph. And if we go to the 75mm photomontage, even I found that a bit shocking, that those turbines are quite clearly coming down towards the sea, aren't they, and coming towards LCT 144. Very poor sighting.
It was very poorly cited, I agree.
One or two other viewpoints that the reporter didn't look at, I'd just like to go to quickly.
Before we leave those viewpoints in that paragraph, can I just say that you have pointed to the way in which some of them seem to be coming down the hill. That isn't actually a point that the reporter makes in that paragraph. What she describes is that they will be seen at relatively close quarters as they go about their daily lives. Well, the Kintradwell turbines will also be at relatively close quarters to the residents of Brora.
Yes, but I suggest responding to you in a different way. What the reporter was, if I can find her document again, which I've buried yet again, was concerned about. Here we are. At relatively close quarters as they go about their daily lives. Well, take that viewpoint 19 as an example. I challenge you on what you say, because whereas for Kintradwell, yes, the turbines will be seen by people in Brora as they go about their daily lives. The phrase I draw attention to is as relatively close quarters. The turbines for Kintradwell will always be seen partly set down behind the initial range, well, behind the skyline. These turbines at West Garty will be seen at relatively close quarters as they come down the hill towards those residents. That's the distinction I draw.
It's a distinction you are drawing. It isn't a distinction, or it isn't a point, because obviously she wasn't making distinctions,
Sure.
but it isn't a point that she's making. And the point I've taken from that is the relatively close quarters. There's no question that the turbines are relatively close to Brora, and it's the idea that people will see them frequently as they go about their daily lives. That, you know, when they're walking on the beach, when they're using the golf course, when they're approaching on the A9, when they're walking through the streets, when they're residents of Dol, when they're coming to and from Dol. It's those aspects, it's that aspect of her decision that I felt was relevant to Kintradwell, not the one that may be correct that you mentioned about them coming down the hill, which she doesn't.
Okay. Go to viewpoint 13 for West Garty. We're at the order Caithness now, which is so. Just continuing viewpoint 19, one more point which I forgot, that the distance between those residents and the turbines in that viewpoint, and I suggest this is what maybe concerned the reporter as much, is 2.9 kilometres. The observations you make about residents of Brora were at 7 or 8 kilometres. That is a distinct difference, isn't it?
There is a difference in distance there, but I don't know whether we've gone through the distances of all the viewpoints that she mentions in that paragraph.
Well, I can give them to you. Viewpoint 19 is 2.9. Viewpoint 6 is for the reporter's note, so he has it. Is at 4.7 kilometres. Viewpoint 7 is at 10.7. Viewpoint 1 is at 11.7. Viewpoint 5 is at 5.1, and viewpoint 23 is at 8.018. So those are the figures for you.
So basically, she is listing viewpoints that are as far or further away than the turbines will be from Brora. So it wasn't simply the proximity. that she was concerned with. She lists a number of viewpoints that are as far away as the Kintradwell turbines are from Brora. So I do think that the point she's making there is relevant, even though some of the places aren't, because obviously it was a different scheme.
Sure. Let's look at a viewpoint which is further away then, for West Garty, at 7.2 kilometres. That's viewpoint 13.
Sorry, are we in West Garty or Helps? We're in West Garty.
Yeah.
Wait, so viewpoint 13, did you
Viewpoint
say?
13, that's the order case NAS. That's that bit of road where if you're not wide awake, you can get into real trouble.
View, yes.
If you go to the 75mm photomontage there, same point really, and I'm sorry if I'm making the same point again and again, but here are the turbines on the coastal hills, on the coastal slope of those hills. That's visibly so from this viewpoint, isn't it?
Yes, it's a particularly bad viewpoint, this one.
Yeah. I think we've been to the other ones I wanted to go to. Thank you very much for bearing with me on that exercise. If you go to page 19 of SLD2 and look at no, we've done that one to death. Forget that point. Sorry, no, it is a slightly separate one. Go to paragraph 3195 on what you say about that on page 19. Summit of Bandoran. The wind farm would dominate the easterly view because of its proximity and the movement of blades. And you say that would also be the case for Kintradwell VP4. Let's just go to viewpoint, West Garty viewpoint 22. The view from Bandoran at 3.5 roughly kilometres. And go to the 75mm image, which doesn't actually capture all the turbines, but it gives us enough of an impression.
Yeah.
And also get out, I'm going to the Nature Scott series, up to you. No, go to the Highland Council series of comparing like with like. Go to viewpoint 4, Kintradwell, the view from Bandoran. And if we go to the 75mm image, we see what we see. Whether you're right or wrong in your comparison of Kintradwell alone, I leave for the report of judgment.
Apologies. I was just
finding
a map that I could look at.
No,
them
do
both
stop me if I'm
together.
going too fast.
So I don't know whether it's helpful. My figure 1,
Yeah.
you can see Benerain and the two schemes all on the same map. So I just thought that might be a helpful thing. It's helpful for me.
Fine.
So that's my figure 1, in case that's useful. And then we're on, in terms of Kintradwell, we're going to which viewpoint?
Highland
It's 4.
Council viewpoint 4.
Yeah.
So there's a reasonably direct comparison because the distance there is 3.7 kilometres. Sorry. As a compare 3.5 makes no difference. Therefore, same distance, same type of view, the reporter can make his judgment. But for Kintradwell, if you go back to the wireline, we can see that there are other turbines in the view.
And we can see that in the visualisation as well.
Yeah. And that's no. Whoa, hang on, you're running ahead. Wait for my question.
Sorry.
My question is simply that is the distinction we can draw at that viewpoint between West Garty and Kintradwell. That there will be other turbines. That they're not new features in the view for Kintradwell.
They are new on the summits of the hills. They're not the only turbines.
You know what I'm asking.
They're not the only turbines in that direction. But right. I would also point out that as well as although the distances are similar, the Kintradwell turbines are significantly larger, so therefore they would, appear closer, as it were, appear relatively larger.
As I said, I'll leave the individual judgments for the reporter. We see what we see, but you've answered my point, and thank you.
In fact, looking at that viewpoint 4, this is another really good example of seeing how differently sited the existing turbines are compared to the proposed Kintradwell ones. We can see that they're right down below, whereas the Kintradwell ones are very much on the top, on the same level as you. I think that's really important, that you're looking across these hills and they're on the same level and higher.
You're entitled to do what a witness does. Make your case. That's good. Go to 621 of your inquiry report, please. Where you quote from the West Garty reporter at the relatively abrupt transition, just remember that phrase, from moorland hills and slopes to coastal shelf, sensitivity of the former landscape character type to wind farms is heightened. You say no consideration appears to be given to this heightened sensitivity in siting Kintradwell wind farm. There's no acknowledgement in the LVIA that areas of transition may have heightened sensitivity. That was paragraph 366 within CD 1039. So could we go to the document, please? And see that, well, first of all, in 166, your quotation is partial because she refers there to, in addition, viewpoint 6, Helmsdale Harbour, shows how the wind farm would be seen in the view with 2 landscape types. Similarly, at viewpoint 13, Order-Caithness, she makes the same type of point. So she's focusing there on those 2 viewpoints. In 3167, SNH guidance states the development on the boundary between LCTs requires careful consideration. I agree this is the situation at the application site. Therefore, although in general terms I acknowledge that the Moorland Hills LCT is one of the highland landscape types most able to accept commercial scale wind energy development, wind farm development, I do not consider it can be said for the precise location of the proposed development, so we're talking about West Garty, clearly there, because of the proximity of other landscape character types which are more sensitive. Now, if we go to the West Garty viewpoint 6 again, my apologies for a different reason now, viewpoint 6, which is one of the ones that the reporter mentions in 3166. I suggest, if you look at any of the montages, but let's look at the 75mm one, that what can clearly be seen is the abrupt transition between LCT 144 and LCT 135. That's the point she's making. From this, don't talk to me about Kintradwell for the moment, let's focus on West Garty. That what we can see here is that abrupt transition.
We can see an abrupt transition here.
And if you went to viewpoint 13 as well, and we've been there so we can be very quick, what we can again see, I suggest, is that abrupt transition between... Sorry, sir, I'm going too fast. Apologies. Is that abrupt transition between the 2 landscape character types? That's very visible there.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to say why I consider it relevant.
Can I take you to one more viewpoint before you do?
Can, yeah.
If we go to Kintradwell viewpoints, so I'll anticipate you and go on to Kintradwell, which is where you want to go, and take you to an H. Scott viewpoint, please. viewpoint 1. So I'm focusing now on the area around Brora and Dole. What I suggest is, in comparison with what the reporter was saying about the abrupt transition for West Garty and those viewpoints. Sorry, I'll wait till you get there.
Sorry, is there a particular reason why we're going to the Nature Scott visualisations?
Yes,
rather than
there is.
I seem to have. I think I've got two lots of.
I mean, use
I've
either.
got two lots of.
Oh, right. The reason I'm going there is there's a broader landscape context shown in the Nature Scott set.
So we want to go to
viewpoint
1. Yeah.
Now, in comparison with the position set out by Reporter Hayward for viewpoint 6 and 13 for West Garty, that abrupt transition we've just been to, my suggestion is that at Kintradwell the position is different. We have much more foreground of LCT 144 before a much more gradual ascent into the hills, first to the first set of hills and then beyond it to the second set of hills where Kintradwell sits. That is a distinct difference between the two projects.
I disagree. Yes, there is more foreground in this particular location, but I think that the transition between the kind of like the small crofts and the moorland hills is just as abrupt in this area. I don't see a transitional area. I see a larger foreground area, but just as abrupt a transition.
All right, agree, disagree there. And I'll make the same points, but quickly, because I'm going to get the same answer for viewpoints 2 and 3. Viewpoint 2, you've got a lot of foreground context called buildings. You've then got an immediate background of the LCT 144 character area, and beyond that, a gradual transition into LCT 135.
Well, again, I very strongly disagree. I think you've got another abrupt transition there, and I think that's one of the things that makes Brora so attractive, that abrupt transition.
And I make the same point for viewpoint 3, and I'm going to get the same response, aren't I?
You are, yes.
That's fine. I won't bore you with that then.
And can I just take us just briefly to two viewpoints where I think you see this abrupt transition, this combination very clearly, and they are from...
I'll be in Kintradwell now.
We are in Kintradwell, yes.
Thought we might be. Go on.
We are, they are from Ben Braggy, and...
So that's viewpoint 12.
Viewpoint 12, and from... Well, let's just go to one, Ben Braggy. That's sufficient. So here we're looking down, and maybe actually that would be we should do that in the Nature Scott one as well. So we're on viewpoint 11. Yes, did I say 11? No, 12. And what we can see here is these sort of like abrupt transitions between here we have a Strath LCT in front of us as well. We have the coast. We have the hills, and this of course is that whole coastline that we've been talking about, looking up from Ben Braggy all the way past Brora. And I think that those abrupt transitions are as apparent here as they were for
Let's keep it open, because it's my turn to use the word strongly disagree. I suggest you're wrong, because in fact what we have here are not simply not an immediate abrupt transition to Kintradwell. We have an intervening Strath, and then there's a bit of LCT, and there's another intervening Strath, and then you rise up to LCT 135A, The position is entirely different from that represented by reporter Hayward at Westgarty.
Yeah, but I was asking you to look at the sort of like the right-hand corner. Yes, it is a different thing looking across the strap. But if you're looking at the right-hand corner, you can see that transition as it comes in from the coast. So you can see the coast, you could see the and even though, you know, the hills are of varying heights, there's quite a different, they've got different land cover, different shape. The transition between the flat crofts and the rising hills is very marked.
Yeah, I'm very glad you took me to this viewpoint, because it also demonstrates another point, doesn't it? It's the inland quality of Kintradwell as viewed from here. Its relationship to the coast is actually quite distant. It's much more related to the landscape we have around Gordon Bush than to the coast.
No, it isn't, because it's at a different elevation. It's the coastal hills, and as I've said, the coastal hills are wider at this location than they are in other parts. But it's related. It is on the coastal hills. It is not on the land behind the coastal hills.
Okay, Ms. Bolger, that was fun. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Just the one question. I think you've had a very full discussion, and I've covered most of the points that were of interest to me, so thank you for that. My one question is, para 753 of your inquiry report, you say there's no details of the access track, but we've since had some details provided by the applicants of the track. I don't know if you've had opportunity to see that, or see I think some cross sections.
I have. What they don't, they're cross sections of the road. What they don't, to my mind, address is the way exactly that the road is going to get up the hill. I mean, to put it at its bluntest, you know. Unlike all the other schemes which are behind, they've all taken their accesses from roads that are already going into the inland, and then they've come off there. This access is proposed from the A9, from the coastal side, and at some point it's got to get up to the top. It's got to rise from the sea level up to that highest point, and I still haven't seen sufficient detail to understand how they're going to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Finlay.
Thank you. I think you were asked a few questions about Glen Sletdale at the outset, and it's just really to orientate the reporter. If you go to, and you won't have this open, CD 214, which is Loth Residents' original consultation response. I don't know whether you can bring that up on your computer.
I can. Just give me a minute. 214. Yes.
If you go to page 4, paragraph 2.1, figure 1, you have a picture, which I don't think we've got a picture anywhere else, of Glen Sletdale.
That's correct, yes.
Mr. Finney, we're at which document are we in? Apologies.
CD 214,
thanks.
Which is Loth Residents'
yep.
initial response, consultation response, and it's just a a picture of Glen Sletdale on in weather conditions that would entice you to walk up.
Yes, and I think you can just see the meanders of the river as it goes along the valley bottom.
And then, can I come to what I might call Mr. Trinick's play it again, Sam, repetition. He's obviously been watching too many old films. By reference to the Westgarty report. And you were... There's just one paragraph I want to deal with, because I think you can, rather than just relying on a reading of the report, assist. It was 3176, Mr. Trinick used as a launch pad for a number of his comments, and it was the unique combination in the vicinity of the application site, and it's the vicinity, and Mr. Trinick was trying to tie that to a particular description from the previous reporter. The passage actually carries on to 3177 because it's the first reference is by a reference to the evidence from Highland Council. The next passage, which is part of the same discussion, says the landscape witnesses for S&H and Loth residents both disagreed, and there were similar coastal landscapes in Kintyre and South Ayrshire. Now, you were the landscape witness for Loth residents.
I was. So,
we can, rather than asking you to remember what you said, we can see what you said because it's recorded by the reporter, as indeed is Highland Council's case, and so for your note, S&H's case, showing what they thought was relevant. But if you go to 3119, and just ask you to read 3119, cast a very brief eye over 3120 and 3121. Was your concern just about that small area of road between Portgower and, I can't remember the southern stretch of it at the moment, the southern marker, but yes, it was Ballinreach and Portgower, or did it go wider than that?
No, I think it's wider than that. I think it's wider than that.
And then just one point to, I'm allowed to lead on this. If you go back to the visualisations for Westgarty, and to viewpoint 15. I'm instructed by both my left and right that the White House, or to pick up Mr. Trinick's analogy, Casablanca, that one can see in the middle underneath the turbines of Westgarty, is indeed Dunrobin Castle.
Oh, right, okay. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great assistance to the inquiry. Thank you. There's a few matters we need to just confirm about the site inspection tomorrow. We have the itinerary, but there are no timings attached to it. A quick look at the BBC weather app suggests it's going to rain in the afternoon, so I'm assuming we might do something in the morning, see if we can get the visits done before the rain comes.
Morning. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, last time I looked at the weather forecast, it looked moderate all day, but that could be variable. So if it's happy to arrange an early start and see how we go, my view would have been, if the weather was conducive, to do the lower level walking routes and driving routes first, and then potentially break for lunch, and then go up to the site access on the A9 and then up into the site subsequently. I think possibly if we make an early start and see how we go, if we can take a view that we potentially just have a quick stop if the forecast is such that we want to get up and get done and back relatively dry, that might be an approach to take, and where it will be in your hands and guided by your preference as to how you'd like the day to go.
Well, more than happy with the itinerary, suggested itinerary. Use 9:30. Does that sound like a... Sorry.
Would there be any rush in doing a part of the site visit this afternoon when the weather is good, the walking part in Brora, and then that would mean you could do the driving part and the going up the hill tomorrow morning? Well,
it sounds like a very good idea to take advantage of the better weather this afternoon. So I don't know how the applicant are, what position you're in for that.
That's entirely possible.
We agree.
Given the time we're currently at, we could have a break, change footwear, and reconvene and do the lower parts this afternoon. Don't see a problem with that.
Okay, with 2 or 2:30, would that be... I mean, I'll have to go back to... I'm staying over in Golspie, so I'll probably just need to nip back there. But I could certainly be back for a 2 o'clock start or a 2:30 start, if that was people's preference.
If we could say 2 o'clock, I think that would be...
Okay. And we'll rendezvous at the car park on Gower Street, near the Co-op.
Yes. Meeting
Can I suggest that we use the car park just a little further on to the left before you go across the railway crossing, because it's underutilised. The car park at the Co-op in Brora it's the end of the week. There's a lot of people come into the village to do their shopping, and it's rather busy and it can get rather cramped. And I think if we use that car park on the left just before you go across the railway crossing, that would be kind of a more social approach.
Is that okay with the applicant?
Yes, that's not a problem.
Okay, so let's rendezvous at 2 o'clock at the smaller car park near the railway crossing, and you can lead us on that part of the site visit itinerary. So is there anything further that parties wish to raise before we close this oral procedure?
Well, yes, sir, indeed. I think you ought to give us some instructions about, as far as you can now, about the policy resume team session, and in the context of that, closing submissions. Get some ideas in our mind about timing.
Yes, I did have the opportunity to raise this issue with my office, and what you suggested yesterday is very reasonable, and we're quite happy to arrange a further virtual hearing session in mid-January. Appreciate you'll need to check your diaries, but if we kind of work on the basis of kind of mid to late January, that'd be fine.
Attention was elsewhere. Is that closing submissions mid to late January? Or the
No, well, it was initially the question was about when we might hold the hearing session, further hearing session on National Policy Planning Framework 4 and the other documents. And presumably that will then have an implication as to when closing submissions would be made.
Just to say, I have a knee operation on the 16th of January, so I may be out that following week, which sounds like the, I just wanted to double check, is the prime time. Slightly earlier in January, or almost
of the week of the 9th of January, if there is availability then, that would seem better. 10th, 11th, 12th, sometime around then.
I have availability on the 9th and the 11th of that week.
Well, the 11th looks good. I'm preempting my instructing solicitor totally, but...
Okay, what day of the week is the 11th?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Well, yes, this is my only commitment at the moment, so I can fall into that.
What do you say?
Or I'm available
Yep,
the
well,
week of the
Tuesday,
3rd, 6th.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm told the 11th is good, so I haven't preempted it too much.
Grateful.
Well, please pencil that in your diaries, and of course we're not entirely sure when the documents are going to be laid before Parliament, but I think the expectation is it will be this month. So that will give time for you to review the documents and come to a view and make a contribution towards the assessment of the application. So thank you very much. Okay. Any further matters before we formally close this inquiry session? Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, sir, and thank you for your conduct of the inquiry, and we've got through in good time, but that's, I think, very grateful to you for that.
Thanks very much.